This week on the pod, we were fortunate enough to have Shawn from Youth Brigade, the Better Youth Organization, and Punk Rock Bowling. It's a cool interview. We go through everything from his start in a band in '79 all the way up to the present. And I hope you enjoy listening. If you would like to support the podcast, please like, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. That's very, very important if you want to help out. And please spread the word. Share with your friends. Post on Instagram. Post on Facebook. Just try to get the word out as much as you can. It would be much appreciated. If you want to go the extra mile, you can go to patreon.com/185milesouth and become a Patreon. Monthly, kick in a little bit of money. And that really, really helps. It's what keeps the show going. You can also donate paypal.me/185milesouth. That's another way to go about it. But let's jump right in. This is Shawn on 185 Miles South.
"185 Miles South", a hardcore punk rock podcast.
Alrighty, this week on the pod we have Shawn from the Better Youth Organization and Youth Brigade fame. And thanks so much for coming on, Shawn.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
And thanks for Fred Hammer for hooking it up. He wanted me to ask about Silver Strand Beach. Do you remember the first time that you surfed on Silver Strand?
I remember the first time I surfed up there because I surfed in Fort Hueneme. Mm-hmm. And it was, at the time, probably the best wave I'd ever surfed because I'd been just surfing for maybe a year and a half, and that was almost exclusively down in Bay Street near Santa Monica Pier. We surfed Zuma, we surfed County Line, Staircase around there, but I'd never been past County Line. And a friend of mine in high school said, "Hey, we got this condo in this place called Port Hueneme." I'd never heard of it. I was 14, I think. Yeah, 14. And we went up there at night, got up there probably 10 o'clock at night with his parents. His mom woke us up at the crack of dawn and made us a huge breakfast, and then we paddled out, and it was one of the best waves I'd ever surfed up to that point. Because it's basically all those sort of A-frame top to bottom beach breaks up there are pretty similar.
Yeah.
Silver Strand was probably some years later. Mostly, I surfed more Oxnard Shores and Fort Hueneme in the early days. Probably didn't hit Silver Strand in Hollywood till I met people up there, and they invited me because in those days you didn't just wander into that beach without knowing somebody, or you ran the risk of getting asked to leave, and I don't mean politely.
Yeah. Yeah, not to jump ahead too far, but once you had known the Aggression guys, you would go and surf with them?
Yeah, I remember when Henry died, we all went surfing before his memorial.
Yeah.
I don't remember ever surfing with any of the guys from Aggression, but I'm sure there was times when I went out when somebody from the band, or there was a whole gang of people up there that we met through the Aggression guys. There was a bunch of skinhead guys up there, the Oxnard crew that was coming down. Some of those guys were working at Godzilla's back in the early, which would have been around 81, 82 when we were at Godzilla's. So I'm sure it was probably some of those guys, but I don't remember exactly who. There was copious amounts of alcohol and weed and so on being consumed through most of my high school and early 20s.
Sure. Well, I wanted to jump ahead just on that, but let's go all the way back to the first release you did, which you did a 7-inch with a band called The Extremes in '79.
Uh-huh.
And this doesn't get talked about too much. I think it's for like the hyper record collectors and so forth. But
Uh-huh.
for fans of the pod, it's on Test Tube Records, which is the same label that put out the third 07-inch. So the Chula Vista band. And this is a weird record to describe. Could you take a stab at it? Because I'm not familiar with anything else that sounds like it.
Yeah, it was. The thing is, my brother Mark and I had been playing in a band with another guy in high school, and we ended up meeting this guy, Michael Schwartz, who went through a bunch of different names. Michael Sinatra, Michael Lord, many different other things. But he was living in the Canterbury at the time. It was the summer of 1978, and we had gone to our first sort of punk show. We went to see the Dickies up at the Whiskey, probably around spring of '78, and there was a girl that went to high school with us, and she was hanging out at the Canterbury, which was right up the street from the Mass. And through her and a bunch of other people we were starting to meet in that sort of spring and summer of 1978, we met Michael, and we started jamming with him. The guy who was playing bass with us didn't want to, he was only, I think, 15 at the time. He didn't really, he kind of freaked out about going up to Hollywood, so we found some other people to play, and so that band came together. And we started it out as a guitar, bass, and drum punk rock band, but he kind of brought in the keyboards, and he was a big fan of David Bowie and Brian Eno and that sort of more art rock stuff, which isn't something that we were well versed in at the time. And so that band sort of morphed more towards that direction. This is all over the period of about, I don't know, a year, maybe a year and a half. And Chris Trent, who was the guy who decided to start a record label, he's the one that ran Test Tube. He'd never done a record label before. We'd never recorded before. We'd never done a record label. So we just kind of all figured it out. That was sort of the nature of the DIY. Me and my brother Mark were the ones who pretty much helped Chris figure out what you needed to do to record a record and then press the record. How to describe it? Well, like I said, it was sort of, I had songs that I wrote, and then Michael had songs that he wrote, and we got this guy Chris in the band, and he was playing keyboards, so he wrote a song, I think. Actually, Michael's song was the cover of, well, it was the Hong Kong Cafe, which they kind of wrote, and they mixed in some sort of Asian song. I don't remember what it was, but yeah, it was very arty. Put it that way. I would just say it was very arty, and I wasn't really interested in moving in that way, so I left the band. Mark stayed in the band for a little bit longer. They got one of the guys from the Flyboys came in the band and replaced me for a minute, but that only lasted another, I don't know, 6 months, and then Mark was out, and after that's when we started the Youth Brigade.
And so when would that have been? Sometime in 1980?
Yeah, 1980s when we sort of tried it out. When we first started it out, we had this house called Skinhead Manor, and that's where we started rehearsing and writing some songs. And we had a couple of friends of ours from Huntington Beach, Rick Fritz and Bob Shawn, and they came in as singers. Unfortunately, they couldn't sing very well, and I was doing singing too and playing guitar, and it was Mark playing drums, and Adam played bass, and we had this guy Kevin Stench who was in No Crisis eventually, but he was in the band. So we kicked. Actually, there was our friend Jason was also for a minute tried to sing too.
Were you confident in your voice? Like, did you like your voice at that time?
Yeah. I mean, I had no problem singing.
I mean, it just seems like a no-brainer. You're a great singer. It's like, who's going to be better?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's just now, we had been playing cover songs. We were doing a cover band since the time we were about 16, 17 in high school, doing mainly rock covers. You know, I was really into Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin, and I don't know if you probably don't know who Robin Trower is, but sort of bluesy rock stuff. You know, we'd do some Aerosmith, we'd do a little of this and that, play at parties. We would put on parties because we were selling weed, and people would say, you know, their parents were going out of town, so let's do a party. And sometimes we would play, or we'd get another band. I don't really remember how exactly we managed to get a keg of beer, but we charged $5 at the door. We'd sell our weed or whatever the hell drugs we had at the time. And then, you know, that's kind of how we got into the whole idea of promotion too. It's just all of the things that we've done in this business, if you call it that, is by necessity. We just sort of figured ways to do things to make a little money and to have a good party, and that's how it started. So, I mean, I was doing covers of other people's stuff, and I'd been singing for several years by that point, so wasn't that difficult.
Yeah, did you guys demo it all, or was the first time you recorded for the comp?
We did some demo work. We recorded 3 or 4 songs that we never. I think the only song that we kept out of those demos was the Brigade song, which is only on that first recording. Right. We had a few others, like there was a song called "Pray for the Dead." We even did this band that we had in high school when we got into punk rock. Like before we moved, we met all the guys from the Canterbury and the Mask and stuff, and started the Extremes. That band was called Mess, and we had some recordings of that on cassette tapes. I had a song called "Vegetate." Some of the lines in that song was, "What's the point of sitting around in your room, smoking PCP with a bunch of goons? All you do is vegetate, 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 vegetate." So those were the deep thoughts I had when I was, 17 years old.
It's pretty good because, I mean, you've always been a pretty proactive person. So you've kind of stuck with that since the age of 17.
Well, I mean, when I was 17, I was a senior in high school, and I was taking for my English literature classes. The first semester was an existential literature class, and I was reading Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre and Kierkegaard, and the second semester of my senior year was a Hermann Hesse class, and I was reading all this Hermann Hesse stuff. So that sort of English literature and philosophy bent was definitely was a heavy influence on the music I was writing it. And that was the year that I started reading about, hearing about, and reading about, and finally going out to see punk rock stuff. Because before that, I was going to, I saw Led Zeppelin at the Forum. I saw all kinds of rock bands. I saw Johnny Winter at the Palladium. And we would go to shows all the time, but it was all rock and roll stuff.
Did any of that? Did any of that blow you away though? Like seeing Led Zeppelin at the Forum, where you like, "Fuck, this is amazing."
A lot of it was pretty amazing. Of course, I had no idea at the time that it was, classic rock. It was the music that I'd been listening to since I got into high school. But yeah, I mean, I was pretty aware that these guys were pretty amazing. I think I took Quaaludes when I went to see Led Zeppelin, so I think I may have passed out during one of the drum solos, because they did that. The thing I saw them at the Forum, and I mean, I just remember a lot of the shows there were seats, which kind of sucked. It sort of takes away from me the energy of a live musical show. To sit in a seat, it's not classical music, it's not jazz music where sitting, I can understand it. When you go to a rock and roll show, and then of course that was sort of the draw of punk rock, is that you didn't go and you didn't sit, you actively participated. Yeah. But yeah, it wasn't lost on me that a lot of these bands were pretty amazing. But of course, when I heard punk rock and I realized I could do this, it sort of brings that bar down where, that was the beauty of punk rock to me, is that anybody can pick up a guitar and or play the drums or bass and sing and get their voice out and be in be inspired to make music and hopefully inspire other people to go out and try and do things for themselves. And that was the difference, because the rock and roll stuff it had become, in my, in a few years during high school, it had become this big sort of, I mean, it wasn't quite corporate yet, but it was definitely moving towards that. I always say in interviews, people talk to me, what got you into punk rock? A big part of it is that the rock and roll that I'd heard about and was a little bit too young to be a part of it from the 60s had sort of devolved into sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I have no problem with sex or drugs or rock and roll, but if that's all there was, the problems that the hippies were standing up and speaking out against still existed after the Vietnam War ended. And that's sort of why punk rock came along. It was the music for our generation at that point,
Yeah. And so you do your own label, and the first release you take on is doing a compilation, which seems so ambitious. You're what age in 82?
I turned 22. My birthday's in May, so I turned 22 in 1982 when we were recording.
And so what's the catalyst of this? Are you aware of most of these bands and you want to get them down on record, or are you reaching out to make friends?
Not at all.
Or yeah, so what's the catalyst?
We knew some of them because at that point we were already we'd been playing out since 1980 off and on, and then it's just sort of a thing of, well, you're in a band, you go out, you're playing live shows, you're getting some attention, people are coming to your shows. The next step is to travel and tour and to make a record. That's just what you did. And we never thought, we should go and try and get on a major label or any label. It was just a thing of, well, you want to play a show, you put it on yourself. You want to put a record out, you put it out yourself. That was just our ethic of doing these sorts of things since we were in high school, just like putting on parties. And so that's what we did. And as far as the compilation, we realized that if we're going to start a label, it would be smart to put out a compilation, because there are some bands that have a bit of a name that have put out some 7-inches, such as Social Distortion, and the Adolescents, who've already got some recognition out there that we didn't have. And so it made sense to reach out to them and get some songs. And then, we didn't know the Joneses, and we didn't know the Battalion of Saints. Friends of ours told us about it, introduced us. And for both of those two bands, we had no idea. They just showed up and recorded. We made a deal with Mystic to do some recording there, and that's just how it worked out. It came out great, but it was kind of a little bit of a crapshoot. I mean, we knew the song Social Distortion had would be good, and Bad Religion would be good. Bad Religion was very new at that point. Yeah. Aggression we knew because we'd done some stuff with them. Remember, we'd been running this club Godzilla's in '81, and so that was also a part of it. Having run Godzilla's, and then we put on this show called Youth Movement '82 at the Palladium around would have been, I believe, in February of '82. So we'd been playing with a lot of these bands. We'd become friends with many of them, and that's why I guess really that was the reason. If we're going to start a label, we'll do a compilation. It will be something that you might be a fan of one band and not have heard the other bands. It's a way to introduce people to a bunch of different bands without committing to buying a whole album of a band that's new,
Yeah, what did you think the first time you heard those Battalion of Saints songs?
Yeah, so we didn't even know who they are. It was Mark Rude who told us. He's like, I got this band, man, they're really good. You should put them on the record. He didn't send us, they didn't have anything for us to listen to, and we'd never seen them play. They just came up and went into the studio, and George was kind of weird about singing, so we had to put a baffle up for him to sing, because he couldn't sing if people were watching him, which I thought was kind of weird for a lead singer. But yeah, they were pretty amazing. it was very different than a lot of stuff that we've seen. I mean, there had been some fast bands like Middle Class at that point, but not anybody that was sort of screaming vocals like that.
Yeah, the songs are wild.
Yeah, it was. It was wild, but it worked out well. And I mean, even the Joneses was very different than anything that was on the record. But, you know, that was the thing in those days that punk rock didn't really have, people now think punk rock sounds this way or sounds that way. In those days, if you had the attitude and you were into, something different, that was punk rock for us. It still is for me to this day. I don't really sort of put this whole label punk and hardcore and what is and what isn't. It's more of an attitude than anything else.
Yeah, and it's also nice on a comp to cut it up a little bit. So, well,
that was the idea. The idea was, hey, here's a bunch of different music from a bunch of different bands. Hopefully, maybe one of these bands or two of these bands, and you get this record and you discover a bunch of new stuff. Maybe it's not all for you. You don't like every song, but the idea was you're gonna be able to establish the label and help get these people introduced to these new bands that they may never have heard of.
Yeah.
And I think it worked pretty well. I mean, it's considered a fairly classic compilation. And to me, that's what a compilation should be. It should be introducing people to a bunch of new bands that they never heard before.
This is definitely a classic compilation. I don't think it's debatable. But do you remember the first time meeting the Aggression guys?
I think the first time we met them, the Starwood, which is down on Santa Monica near Crescent, right in the corner of Santa Monica and Crescent Heights. The Starwood used to do regular Tuesday night shows because there were a bunch of clubs in Hollywood and would go through these stages where the first show I saw was the Dickies at the Whiskey, and that was in '78. But these clubs, there were four sort of main clubs in Hollywood at that point, which was the Starwood, the Whiskey, the Roxy, and the Troubadour. And they would do, one of them might be doing some punk shows, and then there might be some problems, and then they'd stop doing it. Maybe another one would do it. They'd sort of go back and forth. But the Starwood for a while was the place that there were shows. I mean, the Stranglers played there. The first time I saw Devo was there. I don't remember who else. So I saw a lot of great shows there, but I also were giving opportunity for local bands to play on. And I believe it was on a Tuesday night, which typically Tuesday nights are kind of dead. So they let the local punk bands play there. I mean, a lot of bands from Huntington Beach were playing there, like China White, and sure. I'm pretty sure that's where I first met Aggression, just because they would cruise down, and that was just a sort of meeting place early on. And then eventually, when we were doing shows, we did play some shows with them. I can't remember what the first show was, but yeah, I have a feeling that probably the first place we met would have been at Starwood.
Cool. So also in '82, you go and do your first LP, and you go into Mystic and record. And then, can you take me through this? You press 800 copies and then decide that you don't like how it sounds?
Yeah, so we had that, we made some money from Godzilla's and from a little bit of money that we made from Godzilla's we used to put the money up to do the show at the Youth Movement '82 show at the Palladium, and a little bit of money from that we had saved. We decided we were going to start the label and do the recording. We met Doug Moody, and I'll give him credit for giving us some pretty valuable information on how the record business works. And he came up with this idea. He said, there's these little labels, because he'd been around before. I mean, I don't know if 90% of what he says can be believed as far as what he was involved in, because if you listen to him, he was involved in Led Zeppelin recordings and Jimi Hendrix recordings and all kinds of stuff. But maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. I don't know. But he pointed out that and at this time you have to remember there wasn't a lot of sort of independent distribution anymore. I don't know if you know much of the history of the recording business, but at that point there was a lot. The major labels had sort of been consolidating and taking power and buying up the smaller labels in the 60s and then into the 70s. And there was, 5 or 6 major labels at that point. And they would eventually start cannibalizing each other and get taken over by big corporations in the 80s. But at that point, he pointed out that if you release the record, you're basically going to have to go into record stores yourself, try to convince them to take the record. Most of them wouldn't want to pay for them right away. They want them on consignment, meaning you give them to them. If they sell them, then they pay you. If they don't sell them, you got to take them back. And he said, and trying to get your record distributed through the rest of the country and the rest of the world would be difficult. And he envisioned this idea of, well, if a bunch of small labels banded together, they could make a deal with one of these sort of there was several small or independent distributors that had starting up. Most of them were just doing imported stuff, bringing stuff in from Europe that the major labels had picked up. And the punk scene was sort of, the punk scene was sort of great for that because there were a bunch of bands out of England that the major labels had no clue about, and they were starting to get a lot of attention. And so these distributors filled this niche. They would bring these records over from the English pressings of them, and they'd sell them to a bunch of different stores around the U.S. And he pointed out to us, like, look, these are the distributors you probably want to go after, but you're just one little label and you got one record. They're probably not going to pick your stuff up. And it was true, which I would come to find out. So he approached another distributor. His idea was, hey, we'll get a bunch of different punk rock labels in LA together under one banner, and then be able to go make a good deal with the distributor. But he wanted us to be the guinea pigs, and I was very wary of that. But we ran out of money when we were recording, and he basically said, "Oh, I'll give you credit if you let me do this with your compilation and the Youth Brigade record." So I agreed to try it out, and then we left on tour, and everything was kind of rushed. And when we left on that tour, that was another State of Mind tour. The Youth Brigade record hadn't been mastered and pressed, and we were waiting for it. So what Doug did is he went and made a deal with, I think it was Important Records Distribution, and they gave him an advance, unbeknownst to us, and he put all the parts to manufacturing, like the stampers and the mothers, the processing, everything was done under his name, which shouldn't have been because he didn't own it. And he got an advance, and he used that money to press the records. And then, like you said, we heard the record when we were on the road, and we didn't like the way it sounded. We thought it was the mix. We came to find out many years later that it wasn't the mix, that it was just the mastering.
Oh, it was just the mastering.
But when we came back from
that's
yeah,
insane.
the mastering was bad. We remastered it, and it came out much better, and we re-released it on CD many years later. But when we came back from the tour, we took a visit over to Doug and said, "What's going on with the record distribution?" And he said, "Well, he made a lot of excuses, but we said, well, you said you were going to get all these other labels together to do this distribution thing, and there are no other labels. There's just us." And we decided, the plan that you had didn't come to fruition, so we'll just be running this ourselves from now on. And when, first I said, well, I need an accounting. How much money did you get from the distributor? So on and so forth. What did you ship out? Who, an accounting. And he made a lot of excuses and never came up with anything. And so then I got into it with him, and I called the pressing plants, and then that's when they all told me that everything was under his name, and I'd have to get him to release it. And he started bullshitting. This is why I think that he's a thief, because he basically tried to steal our stuff from us by putting it under his name, which was never the agreement that we had made. So basically one night, I don't know if you know about where Mystic was around the corner from the Cafe de Grand.
Sure.
So we were over at the Cafe de Grand one night at a show, and I was tired of getting the runaround from from Doug. So we were drinking a bit, talking up about what an asshole Doug was and how he was trying to rip us off. And some of the Aggression guys were there with us. And we were telling them about it. And we all decided we were going to go pay Doug a visit. It was probably about midnight, 1 a.m. And somebody was recording in there. And we walked in. And we basically, I basically said, I need all my shit released back into my name tomorrow. If you don't, I'm going to smash the shit out of your whole entire studio. And, there was me and my brothers and some of the Aggression guys and a few other friends. And, everything was released back in our name by the next day. And we got all our stuff back. And that was the last time I dealt with Doug Moody. And I warned bands not to do anything with him because he's a thief. He's always been a thief. He got worse after that. And you can talk to any of the hardcore bands that did recordings with him. He basically never, if they ever got any signed contracts, he never paid it. As far as any bands I know that have been done a record with Mystic, they never got a dime from him. They never got a royalty statement or any accounting from him. He would just basically give bands a box of records here, a box of records there, to try and appease them. And that's what he's been doing for the last 35 plus years.
Yeah, because 82 is super early for him.
Yep.
So.
Yep. And if you listen to his story, he helped create punk rock, and he's instrumental in making the punk rock scene in California happen. And hardcore was his invention, and blah 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 blah. But he never wrote a song. Never played an instrument, never played a show, never did any touring. He's just a guy who had a recording studio, which is helpful, and he helped give bands the opportunity to put a record out. But that's all well and good, but if you're just going to rip all the bands off and keep all the stuff, keep their masters, and keep selling the stuff for over 40 years and never pay anybody and never give anyone any accounting and deny that ever happened and act like somehow you own it all and you're the king of punk rock, which you're not. You're the king of hardcore, which you're not. I'd say that's a pretty shitty thing to do. And I do feel a little guilty for having, been the one that, Mark and I are the ones that found the studio and brought Aggression there, and Aggression told all the bands from hardcore. But we did tell all the bands, be careful of that guy. You'll never see any money if you do a recording with him, and you unless you sign a contract and get your rights done. And none of them did, apparently. So what can you do?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is Aggression does the record on your label, and then they go to Mystic after that. And do you know why that would have happened?
Well, because we didn't hear songs from them that made sense to do another record.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, why do you think that Mystic? Why do you think they re-recorded songs that were on the first record?
Yes,
and put them out with Mystic.
Yeah, it's like half and half. that self-titled record. That's kind of that record is kind of strange.
Yeah, they from what I understand, we lost touch with those guys. Mark moved up to Colorado, and for a while they became a sort of blues rock band.
Sure.
And unfortunately, drugs and alcohol, like with many bands, became more important than writing music, it seems. So, it seems that the best stuff they ever did was stuff they put out on BYO.
Well, yeah, of course. it's all their classic material. Is the comp, and then that LP is absolutely the best stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, all the Mystic stuff is kind of like weird live stuff, and then that LP, which is just kind of strange. Just because,
but that's unfortunately the problem is that Doug Moody wasn't really interested in putting out great music.
No, it's quantity. It's quantity.
Yeah, it's quantity, and it's whatever he could put out and try and sell. It was about making money, and we're not talking large amounts of money, but when you're keeping all the money for yourself and you're not paying the artists who deserve the money and should be getting whatever the agreement was, they should be getting it, and they're not. That's not exactly a very good business model for the artist.
Yeah, for sure. So also in 82, you do the documentary, Another State of Mind. And this is it's so ambitious thinking about doing a punk rock documentary in 82. The video cameras are huge. I can't even imagine like getting the sound. You know, who do
Well,
you lean on for information of how to like do this project?
that I can say we didn't really have much. That wasn't something that we did ourselves. That was something where a guy I know, two guys I know from high school. Well, it was mainly one guy I know from high school. This guy Adam Small. So, I don't remember exactly where I bumped into him, but he had managed to get himself involved in this situation where he had all this equipment because he was working for some rich guy who had decided that he wanted Adam to go and follow him around whenever he asked him to and videotape his antics, on his boat, whatever. I mean, it was a weird.
It's a DIY lifestyles the rich and famous.
Yeah. And so that guy, he just somehow I bumped into him and we got talking, and I mentioned that we were doing the tour, and he decided this sounded like a good idea. Oh, maybe it may be that the other guy, Peter Stewart, we went to high school with him too. He had lived in Skinhead Manor for a minute, but Skinhead Manor had ended 8 months. Well, and he had moved out at least a year before we decided to do another state to do the tour. So I don't really remember. Mark might remember, but somehow I saw Adam somewhere, and he mentioned that he wanted to go out and film this, and then he got Peter involved. We all knew each other from high school, so we didn't really have to do very much other than as far as the video itself. I booked the tour. We took some of the money that we'd made from Godzilla's. And had bought the school bus way back, with the idea that we were going to tour. This was way back in, I think we bought that tour bus in maybe November or December of 1981.
Okay. And
then we fixed it up, and you can see us fixing it up before we did the tour. In the movie, they filmed some of that in the little opening montage. But yeah, it was. The disappointment for me, of course, and we see it now more than anything of so-called reality TV and how much it gets manipulated in the editing room. But even then, I was under no illusions. My dad's a filmmaker, so I was under no illusions. I know how movies and TV shows are made, but I had hoped that even obviously you've got to edit it down because you're going to take hours and hours of footage. But they did manipulate quite a bit of the narrative in that movie. I mean, that whole thing of Mike writing that song along the way was pretty much put together. I mean, he came up with the idea while we were on the road, but a lot of that footage of them interviewing him at different places those were done in California after the tour was over. So unfortunately,
it's still nice to stitch it together a little bit, even though if it's a little bit of a fib.
Yeah. The sad thing about it though is there's a bunch of footage when we were in New York that didn't make it in there. There's a bunch of footage. Vice Squad did some shows. There's a bunch of footage of Vice Squad that didn't make it in there. There's a bunch of other bands that didn't make it in there. That whole, I don't know what it was, but Peter became enamored of that girl in D.C. And none of the people that we're friends with in D.C., none of them knew who she was.
Oh.
Everybody's all, who's that girl? We've never seen her at a show in our lives.
Yeah.
So, he saw some girl outside the show, started talking to her, and thought this is a great thing to film and feature in the movie, which was kind of crazy considering how much insane classic punk rock stuff they filmed that didn't make it into this. And I talked to them for years and said, look, let me get that footage. We were supposed to be involved in the editing, and they just, no, we were locked out. No, you just see the finished product. This is what it is. We had no say. But there was all these hours of footage. I'm like, just let us have that footage so we can put something together.
Yeah.
It just sat in storage and then it disappeared. I don't know what happened to it.
Yeah, it's disappointing because years later you would do your own documentary, and that one came out great. So that would have been
Hey.
like an awesome like bonus disc or something. You know, the lost
Oh yeah,
stuff from.
we had. I was trying to get that footage, and then when we went to Europe the second time back in the '90s, we took a video crew around and filmed some stuff. But unfortunately, we have a lot of great ideas, but we just don't. We never had in those days the time and the resources to make some of them happen. But I'm pretty proud of the fact that we were able to go out, do these tours, and get that movie made, and have this label and put out all these releases. It wasn't easy all the time, and we had no idea a lot of time what we were doing. But we managed to do all that, and we also managed to, not to sort of sustain ourselves and make a bit of a career, and pay the rent, get by, and survive all these years, which not an easy thing to do.
At the end of the day, it was an inspirational movie about like touring in punk rock. I think it still inspires. It inspired me. I loved it.
Yeah, and I mean, in the day, there was a thing called Night Flight, and somebody contacted me from there and said, we have this show. You should get your movie. They heard about the movie. I don't think they'd seen it, and I'm the one that called the guys who owned it. Said because they made a deal after they finished making it. They made a deal with a porn distributor, because that was sort of the beginnings of the videotape industry. I don't know if you've seen Boogie Nights, but there's a whole thread in Boogie Nights where there's the argument between making porn videos on film when the future was videotape and it's way cheaper, and they didn't want to switch over. But
sure.
So porn distributors, porn movie makers were some of the pioneers in the video industry, and that's who they made a deal with. The porn distributor said, we'll take this movie and we'll put it on VHS and sell it. It didn't do very well, but we got it onto this show called Night Flight, which was, on one of these networks. I don't remember what it was, but it got that helped enable it to get all over the country. And it was shown late at night, I think, most of the time, 11, 12, 1 in the morning.
Sure.
But that sort of helped make it become a little bit of a cult thing for a while.
That's super cool. And a lot of people don't know that there was a second bus went too, right? Like was Aggression and Battalion of Saints, did they go on the tour as well?
Well, they did their own thing. I mean, they came to us and said, yeah, we want to go out and do a tour and all this sort of stuff. And I said, cool, but we don't have any money, They seem to have this. I've read before or heard stories before where we have this sort of idea that somehow it was an official thing that we put up, that we were involved in, and that we abandoned them and they broke down or something.
Well, that's why you're here to straighten it all out, Shawn.
I mean, it's like they said to us, oh, we want to do something like that. And we said, cool, go for it. But we don't have any money to and it's hard enough just for me to book us this one thing.
Right.
I'm happy to share with you all the information that I have. If you want to go out and book it, do it yourself. But we're not a booking agency. We're doing this one tour for us, and we asked Social Distortion to come along because they had a 7-inch out and they were getting a bit of notoriety at the point.
Yeah.
But yeah, this idea that the Aggression and Battalion of Saints were going to go out and do this other BYO tour. We said, yeah, go for it if you want. But we had nothing really to do with it other than saying, yeah, do it.
So it was a totally separate thing. It wasn't like the Another State of Mind tour that they were on.
No.
Okay. No. It's a completely separate thing they went off and did.
Yeah, I mean, we were vaguely aware of it, but I don't think it made it past Arizona from what I know, or maybe Texas.
Okay.
And I think they broke down. But yeah, it was not something that we had really any hand in. We didn't finance it. We had no money. We didn't have anything to do with booking or mapping it out or doing anything other than they just mentioned they wanted to do it. And we said, yeah, if you want to do it, go for it. I mean,
gotcha.
We don't have money to fund it, and we certainly can't book it. don't have a bunch of people sitting in an office in LA that are, we're not some label like, some major label or even we're not Splash Records or any of that sort of stuff. At that point, Splash had become a decent label that ended up going and making a deal with a major, but that's not anywhere near where we were.
So in '83, you go back and you record the LP again, and you just switch out some songs, and this is a recording now that you're finally happy with, and this is the Sound and Fury LP that like you still buy today, correct?
Yeah, we came back. There was a pretty sort of life-changing experience to travel around the U.S. and Canada, and a bus that kept breaking down, being documented on film, and watching the sort of soap opera that you see on Another State of Mind as everything falls apart.
Sure.
But managing somehow to make it through all that, I'm the one that put the whole thing together. I'm the one that booked the whole thing, and we managed to finance it, get the money, and make it through all the way around. Even though there were gigs, some of the last parts of the tour, the gigs had to be canceled because half of 2/3 really of actually 3/4 of Social Distortion left,
Right?
As did several of the roadies. But yeah, I mean that experience, and then I went back. I went to UCLA when I got back for that year, and I wrote some songs, and we realized that we didn't want to re-record all the songs that we had. We'll keep a few, but we had a bunch of new stuff, and that's when we went into the studio. And we were lucky enough to get Tom Wilson to go in with us, who's a great producer, and he worked with TSOL and Adolescence, and we were pretty happy with how it came out. We hadn't worked with him before. Several of the songs when we went in the studio were pretty either brand new or very new. We were just sort of coming up with ideas in the studio, which sometimes works out well and other times doesn't, but it worked out well for us in that case.
Do you see your popularity kind of explode after the LP comes out in Southern California, or was it always like just a constant?
Yeah, I mean, it was never an explosion. It just sort of was a build. It was building, but for sure, putting that record out and getting good reviews in some pretty big time, national newspapers, music magazines, and LA Times and stuff like that was a big deal. And it gave us opportunity to go out and do another tour of the U.S., which, yeah, I mean, it was pretty amazing when we went out on the tour after the record came out, because definitely we were drawing a lot more people than, you see in Another State of Mind. That most of those shows were not more than a few hundred people at best. When we went out after the Sound and Fury record came out, we played in Boston, and it was about 1,000 people, and it was insane. It was a riot. We were showing up at places, and there was lines around the corner in some of the shows, and
so awesome.
Not all of them, but definitely the bigger cities we were doing pretty well in, and it got us interest from Europe, and we were able to license the record in Europe and then go tour Europe in the fall of '84. So yeah, obviously having a record out makes a difference when people like it.
Your second tour, did you go in a van?
Yeah. Yeah, we've been in vans ever since.
Yeah. That is cool.
Which I never really thought about it. I mean, the reason that we've always said we never want to do a bus is just we've always been a 3-piece and maybe 4-piece for a lot of the last 20 years. But we like being in a van, and maybe we just had an aversion to buses because of Another State of Mind tour. The bus kept breaking down. I never really thought about it, but just buses are huge. I get why bands do it because you don't have to get hotels, but personally, we like to stop and hang out in town and meet people, that we come to play for, and to sort of live in the city, even if it's only for a day, but just to hang out and get to know the city a bit and see what's going on there. I mean, I've always had an aversion to touring as a sort of thing where you just stop. You don't sort of mix with the local people. You're going all that way to play for them, so why wouldn't you want to hang out with them? And I remember there were some labels who would go out on tour and they'd only take bands on their own label to support them. I mean, I always thought that was pretty shitty too. I want to meet the local bands that are playing. That's how you network with people and get to make friends and hear different music and meet new people. I mean, that's something we've always tried to do. And, we ended up meeting a lot of cool bands that we ended up putting their records out, like SNFU and 7 Seconds and the Bouncing Souls and the Breeze and so on and so on and so on. So,
yeah, that kind of leads into the second comp that you do, the Something to Believe in LP. Because you put some Canadian bands on that I'm sure that you met on the Another State of Mind tour, right? Did you meet SNFU on that tour?
Yeah, we did. We met we met quite a few bands on that tour. We met Stretch Marks on that tour. We met The Unwanted. Yeah, and then Youth in Toronto and Young Lions, and so that was. And also because we're originally from Canada, we felt a sort of a kinship, I guess, and we wanted to help out putting bands out. And there were a lot of good bands up there that weren't getting the attention that U.S. bands did. So we thought, oh, this would be cool. These are good bands. I mean, we wouldn't have done it if the bands weren't any good.
Yeah, well, you got DOA on here too, which is also like one of the real early touring road dog bands.
Yeah, but DOA was already somewhat established, so people knew about DOA. So they were helping us more than we were helping them.
Sure,
so we were happy to have them and be involved. But
yeah, you also have 7 Seconds on that on that comp, and then in '85 you do their classic LP, The Crew. Do you remember?
Yep.
Do you remember meeting 7 Seconds the first time?
I think they came down here and played. They might have played with us at the cafe. I'm not sure, but we definitely met them down here, and then we became friends with them, and we went up and played in Reno. And I know that Pushead and Kevin were writing to each other, and Pushead came down with his band Septic Death. I know that he came down to the show that we were doing in Reno, and me and Pushead were walking across the street before the show and got caught up in some sort of sting that the police were doing, trying to nail underage kids going into casinos, not even doing anything wrong. They weren't even allowed to walk into the casino.
Jesus.
And I said, this is ridiculous. I was 21 by then. So when they realized that I was 21, they made up some bullshit for me and Brian that we were walking against the light in a crosswalk, even though it was a green light and we were walking in a crowd in the middle of a bunch of tourists. So it was complete bullshit. But needless to say, we didn't get to play the show because I spent a good part of the night sitting in jail waiting for someone to bail me out.
Jesus. Yeah. But
that was fun.
Well, that LP is super, super awesome and classic. And then does Youth Brigade, you kind of take a break and you start doing The Brigade in '86?
Yeah, we did a 7-inch first.
You did the What Price is Happiness in '84.
Yeah, and then we were sort of, we were getting influenced by more melodic bands, the new wave bands, and the whole punk scene was kind of exploding with sort of violence. I mean, the Olympic Auditorium, the scene was sort of dwindling a bit at that point, where shows moved from the Olympic Auditorium to Fenders. That was become the main place where shows were happening, and a lot of fights. And then my brother Adam decided that he was going to go back to art school. And when that happened, we got this guy Bob Gnarly from Plane Rap in the band, and we were just writing songs that I guess were getting more and more melodic, and I don't know. We decided that we would be the Brigade, the Youth Brigade. And if you listen to what we were doing, I like it. I mean, for me, it's sort of the sort of natural progression of the more melodic youth brigade stuff that we were doing. But a lot of bands were doing that. Channel 3, 7 Seconds with New Wind, Adolescence, TSOL. Jack left and they got Joe Wood in there, and that was much more bluesy rock band than what they'd done before. But it was just sort of the thing that happened.
Yeah, can we just jump back a little bit, because you talk about the scene dwindling, and just in my head it's so hard to wrap my head around the idea of their like shows at the Olympic Auditorium, like punk rock shows. Like what is a band that could headline there and sell it out? The only time I've ever been there is like to see pro wrestling.
The bands that were headlining there were, mostly the English bands would be the big draw.
So the big headlining tours that come out.
Yeah, but in those days they didn't really do these tours. They would just come out to the West Coast. They played it West Coast to East Coast, probably maybe Chicago, maybe a show or two in Texas, just the bigger states. They wouldn't do the full U.S. tour. It just wasn't. It didn't make sense for them because they're not going to draw. L.A. was at that point, and still is to this day, the biggest punk rock scene in the world, where bands that have a draw can still bring in 2, 3, 5,000 people, depending on who the band is and what the bill is, and so on.
So those English bands, would they fly in and then they would just fly between the major metropolitan areas, like with their guitars and just have like a backline?
Yeah, they'd rent the backline. I mean, it's the same thing. So that's what all the bands do still to this day. They would fly in. They would probably bring their guitars. They might rent a van to go if they're going to do L.A., San Diego, San Francisco,
sure, maybe
Phoenix, and then they might fly to Chicago and then fly to New York and maybe do New York, Boston, Philly, something like that.
Yeah. And when there was shows in the Olympic Auditorium, was it just on the floor, or did they have like the seating open and everything? Like, was the whole thing packed?
The floor would be packed. And the bigger shows were probably 5,000, 4,000 or 5,000 people with the really big shows. Jesus. And the floor would be pretty packed, and some people would sit up in the seats, but that was more just to take a break. I mean, Dead Kennedys would headline. Maybe Black Flag or Circle Jerks might headline. I'd have to look at the old flyers. We were usually around second on the bill, second or third on the bill. I know we did a show when we got back from Europe with the Circle Jerks and the Vandals. So there were a lot of the shows with English bands. You'd have a good, strong Southern California bill,
with just them sitting on top.
Yeah, I mean, an English band on top. Yeah, and it wasn't all the English bands. It wasn't any English band, but for sure GBH in those days could headline for sure. I mean, Coxbar never came over. They wouldn't. Coxbar is bigger now than they ever were way back then, but they never even came over. And those early bands. I mean, the Clash wasn't together at that point, but the Clash would have done. The Clash were never really involved. Like when the Clash first came over, they played at the Santa Monica Civic, and they had Bo Diddley open for them, which was amazing. But I remember it may have been the second time they played was they did 3 or 4 nights at the Palladium with the English Beat as main support.
Wow,
that was pretty awesome. Yeah.
Did Blitz ever come?
I don't remember Blitz coming to L.A. I know I heard they played in Texas and the singer got hit by a car, right?
Well, yeah, that was like 10 years ago, though, right? That wasn't like in their prime.
That was more, like 20. I think it was in the 90s.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't remember Blitz ever coming. A lot of in the early days, like Shawn played at the Whiskey 2 nights with Dead Kennedys open was main support. That was sold out. Stranglers played the Starwoods, probably played. I can't remember. I think they played someone else. The Jam came once and played at UCLA, which was a pretty amazing show.
Wow.
So who else? Susie and the Banshees played the Whiskey. The Whiskey was the main place early on.
Yeah.
But when the scene, the sort of one of the shows that really, where it really changed was the first punk show at the Olympic that I know of was Public Image. And that was the show when like everybody, and that was in 1980. And that was the show when the punk scene just sort of blew up, because that was when all the, me and my brother were surfers, and we knew once the surfers got into it that it would explode. And that night you just saw people were meeting up from all these different places. There was a bunch of Huntington Beach people there, and unfortunately people with long hair were getting beat up because, we used to get chased down the street by long haired, sort of, they weren't rednecks, but
like
they were
bikers.
Just rocker people who weren't even bikers. I mean, they were just guys with long hair who just thought punk rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't like punk rock. But there were plenty of people with long hair who loved punk rock, and just, unfortunately, at that point, people were so pissed about, people in the suburbs would get chased by people with long hair who thought you were a weirdo. You get called fag, you get called all kinds of stupid, weird, dumb names that made absolutely no sense because people are afraid of things they don't know about because people are ignorant.
Yeah.
But that all changed, punk rock. And then punk rockers became the crazy ones that you didn't fuck with anymore.
Right.
And that show, Public Image, at the Olympics, there was probably 5,000 people there, and that was the beginning of when the scene really started to explode in LA.
Yeah. So what's the cap? What's the cap at Fenders? Is that like 800, 1,000?
No, Fenders I think it was like a couple thousand, maybe.
Holy shit, that's still huge.
1,500 to a couple thousand, something like that. Yeah, it was still pretty decent size, but compared, before the Olympic was really taken off, the Fleetwood was doing shows in the South Bay, and that's sort of where you had a meeting of South Bay punk was exploding, and then the Huntington and Long Beach people were exploding. So a lot of those bands played, China White, TSOL, Adolescent, Social Distortion, and we were doing shows with bands in LA. We would find halls to do stuff. For a while, we were doing shows out at a roll rink out in the valley called Devon. What was it called? It was in Northridge. Happy Times. No, that was the one down. That was another one. I forget the name of the roller rink, but and then we did shows at Cal State Northridge at Devonshire Downs. So we did a couple there. So there was places all over. We were just always looking for places to do shows. So. And then what happened was we were one of the main promoters in LA for, after we were doing those shows at Godzilla's, and then we did the Palladium, and we were doing shows at roller rinks and wherever we could find. And the people in New York who were booking the English bands were trying to play us, and Gary Tovar, who was doing Golden Boy, but he was doing it in Santa Barbara and then Goleta. And he started to come down to LA to do shows, and the agent in New York was trying to play us off against each other in a bidding war to push the guarantees up to English fans. And we just called Gary because we'd played shows with Gary. And we just called him and we said, "This is dumb. We know we don't want to raise the ticket price at the door. So let's just work together." And so that ended that whole play for them. There was a guy in San Francisco, CD Presents, this guy David Ferguson, total asshole. He tried to come into LA, and we kind of fucked him over a couple times, and he stopped. But we just got to the point where, Gary was doing a good job, and when we did the Youth Movement '83, that turned into a huge riot, and that's when that was co-promoted with Gary, and that's when we said to Gary, "You know what? You just do the promotion. We're out. We don't want to deal with it anymore."
How long did oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, and that's when he, eventually he's the one that moved over and started doing shows. As things started exploding, he's the one that ended up doing the shows at the Palladium. At the Olympic.
Okay, cool. How long did the Brigade play shows for? How many years?
Maybe a year.
Oh, okay. And then you're still doing the label and hustling because you start. Are you licensing like you do like there's a French press of a Youth Brigade record that comes out. There's an Italian press, and it's kind of like a mishmash of a lot of your best songs?
Yeah, that was just a sort of limited license thing with some people that we met when we were on the road. But basically, I'd made a deal for Europe with Don Loader, who ran Southern Studios. I got in touch with him because Ian from Minor Threat had started working with him and told me he's a good guy. He was a good guy. But over the years, his very sort of laid back, I won't say anarchist, but because he worked with Pratt.
Sure.
But he definitely has a sort of mentality of, look, we're a real no frills thing. We just put the records out. We don't do advertising. We don't do all that. And I said, that's fine. It was just, eventually when we stopped with the band, I stopped running the label out of the States. I just said, you just do it for the world now. And that was right at the time of when the CDs were coming out. And he was he had a recording studio there in England too. That's what he started with, was a recording studio. And he's a very smart guy who knew a lot about getting good sounds. And so he was very, very into the whole CD thing. And when the CD started, it cost a lot of money to master to digital. But he's the one that did it for all of our stuff. But he also, the label got bigger, and that's when it changed from, we don't really do any advertising or any of that, to it switched from in 180 degrees where they were all about that. We're spending all kinds of money, and we had never really discussed doing all that. And he just sort of changed the terms of our deal without discussing it with us. And when I called him on it, we ended up leaving because it didn't work for us. And that's when we took it back. When we tried working with him a bit when we started, and my brother started Royal Crown Review, and that was probably about 88, 89 when they started playing. And then I think we recorded the record in 89 or 90. Yeah, 90, I think it was. And then I had another band called That's It for a little while.
91, 92? Do a couple records? A couple 7-inches?
Yeah. Yeah, I did an album and a couple 7-inches, a German 7-inch, and we recorded actually in Southern Studios when we were on tour the first time.
And I couldn't find that. That's It stuff. What is that like?
It's sort of like, I guess, in between the Youth Brigade and the Brigade stuff, I guess. It's more melodic. I mean, we had Tommy from the Stupids in the band.
Okay.
But his stuff was very sort of poppy. And the stuff I was writing was maybe a little bit harder than that. Yeah. But it definitely was more melodic than that.
Right. And then also right at that time, 1991 is when you do the Sing with California CD, which is basically all the classic Youth Brigade stuff from the 80s gets put on one CD.
That happened awesome when we got back together, because we used the artwork from the English version, English release of Down in Fury. That guy, that was done by one of the guys from Kraft.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, we used that on the CD.
And then you get back together in 91?
Yeah, we were basically, I was on tour with That's It, and my brother's on tour with Royal Crown, and we met up in Europe, in a German, I don't remember where it was. It was in Hamburg. We were at the bar after the show, because we both our bands played that night, I believe, in Hamburg. So I said, all right, let's meet up at this bar. And we met up at the bar. Jens from this band, the Smarties, German band from Hanover, who we put out their record back in the 80s. He had been following my brothers around with a guitar, playing all these Youth Brigade songs, going, "Why aren't you playing? You guys should do Youth Brigade."
Yeah.
So I said, I'm fine. I'm happy to do it, but the only thing I say is that we have to write some new songs.
Sure.
And so they agreed, and we wrote some new songs, and we put out the Come Again EP, and we played in LA. We did a few shows around, and then we went and toured the US, and we toured Europe, and that's it's been on again, off again ever since.
Yeah, and that's an amazing comeback record. I mean, you're talking about years and years of not writing Youth Brigade music, and it comes back and like I think it's the first and the fourth song. Like they just sound like so classic Youth Brigade, and then there's a little stuff on there that's maybe a little more rockin', a little more like maybe more outside the box of the classic Youth Brigade, but like those songs are just dialed in, like you're ready to go.
Well, I mean, consider that, my brother's been playing jazz music for, at that point, what, 3-4 years? And I've been doing the stuff with this. So, and we've both been on the road. So we had our chops, and it's like, all right, we're going to do Youth Brigade. So it was definitely this thought in our head of don't overcomplicate it. Let's do Youth Brigade. We're not trying to do, we're not trying to do anything super different, super complicated. Let's like get back to the roots of what Youth Brigade does, and that was our plan. And I think we did a decent job at it.
Yeah, and so you said you did a full U.S. and Europe off that.
I think so, but honestly, can't remember exactly. But I'm pretty sure because it was pretty normal for us. The plan is always, when we do tours, we always sort of map them out ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we use an agent, which we don't always do, a lot of times we book it ourselves. But even if we use an agent, we just sort of map it out. Like, here's what makes the most sense. The bigger towns you try and do on the weekends because you're going to have bigger crowds in those towns no matter what.
Sure.
You want to get them on the weekends, but we like to route things where we're not driving all over the place, and we like to try and set it up that if we have a town that we like, then we can hang out for a few days or set up space there and just drive off an hour this way or a couple hours that way to do a show and come back. And the same with Europe. We like to do it in as much of a circle as possible. We don't like to go up and down and back and around.
Of course.
Another reason why we don't use those buses. I mean, that's a lot of bands will do tours with the buses, and they just live on the bus. They sleep on the bus. The driver, after the show's over, they just get on the bus and drive to the next town. And that's, to me, that's like I was saying before. That's not fun. I want to hang out, and party with everybody, because that's really what it is, right? You're driving to a different city every day to have a party with the people, and
what's the point?
Celebrate. You celebrate the music and get together and exchange ideas and have some drinks and reminisce, talk a little philosophy and social justice and what have you. And that's a huge part of being on the road for us. We enjoy that. So I don't know. I guess it's more of a job for some people. So, I get out, I play my hour or hour and a half, and then I get on the bus and drive to the next city, and that's it. I'm not there to hang out with people. I'm there to just do my job. I don't know. That's weird to me, but I have actually talked to people who that's what it's become for them. And if it became that way for me, I would stop. I wouldn't enjoy it. It's never been a job for me. This is our life.
Yeah.
This is a community of people that we've been working with, together with them, trying to make a positive difference in the world for the better part of 40 years.
Yeah. What is Southern California punk rock like in 1992? What's the scene like? Because this is like right before it breaks, but you've already had, like the Pennywise, Bad Religion's back. They've been back for a few years. They gotta be popular. You have the Pennywise, the Epitaph bands. NoFX is already good by now. So there's these bands are going.
It's starting to resurrect itself, because what happened was the hair bands took over in the sort of 86, 87, 88, 89.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a sort of a resurrection of Fugazi, and I mean even bands that people don't consider punk rock, but that sort of kept that punk rock aesthetic to me on the radio. The Pixies,
sure,
Smashing Pumpkins, and that whole sort of whatever they call it, post-punk. To me, even if you don't consider it punk rock, it's definitely inspired by punk rock. I guarantee you that all those people in those bands will list you a whole bunch of punk rock stuff.
Well, it's
And then,
still,
the early beginning.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
still a
that was
counterculture.
their, yeah. And then the grunge thing is starting up. But I mean, yeah, by this point in the early 90s, the punk scene is nowhere near what it was in the, 83, 84, 85, but it definitely still exists in Southern California. And like you said, Bad Religion, I remember seeing I saw Fugazi at the Palace. It was insane. It was like seeing a jazz band,
Yeah.
some classic Miles Davis or something. The way they played. And I've seen Fugazi numerous times before. And at that point, Billy Bragg was out touring around then too, doing pretty well. And then what happens? You get Bad Religion leaves, Epitaph around that time in the early '90s. Green Day blows up, Offspring blows up, and then Rancid and NoFX follow. Not necessarily as big, but all these bands are getting on K-Rock, which is a big deal at that point because that's helping you move from selling 50,000 to 100,000 records into the realm of gold and even platinum records. So talking 500,000 to a million or more.
Yeah, and do you see any of that with the Happy Hour LP that comes out in '94? It's right at that time.
No, not us.
Yeah,
we're still a fairly underground punk band, and we suffer from the same thing that caused us to sort of fall apart in the '80s, which is we have a label and we have a band. We have duties with the label. That every time we go out on the road, things of the label are sort of they're not in limbo. We have people running things, but it's just we just never have the resources to hire a staff, and we're not making enough money as a band and getting us popular to help push the roster of the label the way, say, Bad Religion and then eventually Rancid and Offspring and NoFX were able to do for Epitaph. And then, NoFX splits and starts fat and gets a bunch of bands that he produces all the bands, and they have that sort of fat sound.
Yeah, the Ryan Green, the do-da-da-da.
Yeah, and that coupled with the fact that NoFX is blowing up and taking all those bands out on the road with them helps basically get the whole crowd that loves NoFX to be into No Use for a Name and Lagwagon and on and on and on. We never had that, but we have a much more diverse taste in musical styles, and we never would go in the studio and try and make a sort of BYO sound. We just sign bands that we like, whose music we like, that we, who we believe we could help. The Bouncing Souls would probably be one of the better examples of a band that we were able to help them grow, and and Hepcat too, and I hope the Briefs as well. Although unfortunately they just didn't. They never got the kind of attention I thought they deserved because it's just a great band. But the same thing with Leatherface,
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that. How did you meet Leatherface?
I heard them. I had this Spanish girlfriend, and I heard them from her. I heard much when we were on tour in the early '90s, and I really liked it. I'd written to Frankie, and he, at that point the band was broken up. And he said, "Yeah, we're not, Dickie's out, and we're not doing anything." And I said, "Well, if you ever do, we'd love to put a record out." And then Hot Water Music, I heard about them. I hadn't really heard their music.
Mm-hmm.
I think Wallard called me up because he said, we want to tour with Leatherface. We're huge fans. And I contacted Frankie, and he said to call you because you're his label. And I said, really? Awesome news to me, but that's great. And that's when Mark and I came up with this sort of idea of let's put, they want to do a tour. And I said, well, if you guys are going to do a tour, put a record out. Because Leatherface hadn't had a record out in a while. It would be a good idea. And Frankie said, well, I don't think I've got enough for a record. And that's when we all sort of put our heads together and came up with the idea of, he was all, we just do an EP. And we said, it costs the same amount of money to make a 12-inch vinyl with 6 songs as it does to make a 12-inch vinyl with 12 songs. So if you don't have enough, how about we do a split with you and Hot Water Music in time to do your tour? And that's how the split series started.
Yeah, it was a brilliant idea that a bunch of labels did after that.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't our, we're not, it wasn't an original idea. I mean, people had done it before, but I think most of it had been done on 7 inches. And
Well, it'd be done as one-offs, not as like a series.
Yeah, well, Mark really, like, he came up with the concept of sort of following that blue note jazz thing where the covers were similar all the time. That's why you see that we had that in the first two, and then the No Effects Rancid one. Tim decided he was going to do his own artwork, which we said, fine, whatever you want to do. You want to do artwork, it would be great. People will dig it. Yeah, so that worked out well. And then just everything was sort of morphing, and we started our party in Vegas, and that ended up becoming our sort of, the thing that we live with now, because digital was taking over during that whole time of these last 20 years. And
well, we got to do the 2 LPs first, Shawn. So because you did Happy Hour '94, which is rad record, but To Sell the Truth 1996, this is the masterpiece. I think it's the best Youth Brigade record.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I like it.
I absolutely love it.
That was when we were touring a lot, and Johnny was in the band, and Johnny wrote a song. It's funny because Johnny would bring in these songs, and I love Johnny. He's a little depressing for me, but that's just his personality.
Okay.
But that song, the one song that we did put on there, Tomorrow, was the song that he came in with, because he kept bringing me songs in them, and I kept saying, Johnny, these songs are great, but they would be much better if you should be in Social Distortion.
Yeah.
I kid you not. You can ask him, and I'll tell you it's true.
Mm-hmm.
These would work much better for Social Distortion. They just don't really work for us. And then he wrote Tomorrow. Well, we kind of had this sort of riff, and we sort of all came up with the music, but he had the lyrics. And I mean, that was like, yeah, this is perfect. This works for us. This works for you, Brigade. I mean, it's still a little depressing, but unfortunately, that's just not the kind of songs he wrote, which is why he ended up getting a Social Distortion, which is perfect for him, because he writes songs that are perfect for Social Distortion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that record, I'm pretty happy with that record. It was definitely sort of, there was a lot of good songs on that record, and we still do a lot of those songs.
Yeah.
We'd been touring quite a bit for the past several years at that point, so we were in a good state to write songs, and it came out well.
Yeah, so dialed in and catchy, and I don't know, it just seems like where do you? I guess this is a good time to ask. Generally, where are you when you write songs? Like, how does a hook come to you?
There's two ways. I mean, sometimes something will pop in my head, and I'll just sit down and sort of play a little bit. Maybe I only get a melody with a few chords, but I'll hold on to that, and then I'll go over it with my brother. Sometimes I'll get like a full verse and chorus, and that's the whole basics of the song. And then when I sit down with my brothers, we sort of flesh it out and throw in some idea. Everybody throws in some ideas. In the lyrics, sometimes I'll just get an idea. Maybe it's a song title. Maybe it's a couple of lines. I just write stuff down, and I just throw it all into scraps of paper, and I throw it all into a binder.
Yeah.
It's rare that I can sit down and just write a song all at once. But sometimes I do. Yeah, sometimes I've got music, and then I just sort of hum along melodies until I come up with something. Maybe I'll bullshit my way through when we're playing it. I won't have any words necessarily, but once we sort of flesh out the music, I'll sit down with some ideas of songs. Maybe I have an idea when I've been sort of making noise when we rehearse that a couple of words will come to me. I'll use that as a basis, and then I'll sit down and put something together. Sometimes I just sit down and start writing, and I'll be able to write the whole thing out. But, sometimes it's a jigsaw puzzle. There's no one way for me.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there was like a pattern with with it coming through because like the songs are so like it's just lots of hooks. So like I don't know if I'm alone on a Wednesday night, I'm on my fourth drink, and that's when like a hook comes to me. Or I almost all my ideas they come to me like in the shower. And when I was talking to Tony Cortez from Ill Repute, he was saying the same thing. Like I just get hooks in the shower, and I think it's like a white noise thing, or who knows what the fuck it is. But you've been writing songs for your whole life. Writing song is not like it's not like doing traditional artwork where you're sitting down and you're laying down lines. It's more of a channeling, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there are people, there are people that are disciplined and that's what they do. They just sit down every day,
Sure.
Just like a writer who writes novels,
Sure.
or screenplays. They sit down every day and then just write. And, then it's a process. It's an editing process. And that my editing process is more like a jigsaw puzzle. Like I say, I'll have a book full of scraps of lines here and there. And I may try to put some of them together and they may make no sense and they may seem really stupid. But I mean, I was an English lit major, so when I would have to write a paper, I would write a draft and then I would let it sit and then I'd go back and then I'd edit it and cut it down. And I do the same thing now when I'm writing emails, when I'm writing stuff for Punk Rock Bowling, when we were writing bios for bands, things like that. It's the same sort of a process of you're just always editing, cutting it down, making it more taut, getting rid of the extra bullshit that you don't need. I'm always very conscious of words because it's important, to me, it's really important to not be super simplistic. I think that's an insult to the people that are listening to your songs. And I mean, for me, words matter almost as much, sometimes more than the music. And I also think melody is super important. The voice is the lead instrument. The human voice is unlike any other instrument you're going to find. I mean, people could argue that synthesized music, maybe on computers can rival the voice, but I would disagree with that. At least I've yet to hear the equal of the human voice or anything that people have done with computers. And I think it should be the lead, and you can't just mimic what the melody of the music is, and the music should always be sort of behind the vocals. I don't like it when simplistic punk rock music is when the music is da 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 da, and the guy sings da 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 da.
Of course,
it's stupid. That's not how music should be. That's not. It may stick in your head, but are you going to really be able to discern what the vocals are and what's being said? No. You want the hook should always be the melody of the vocals. You can have other hooks that are music, a guitar line, a keyboard line, drum or bass, whatever. That's fine. And that's very important. But I still think it's important to have a good melodic line. That's what makes the best songs. Is you have to have a good melody. That's what you're going to have a good hook. But I often come up with great ideas when I'm sitting out in the water surfing.
Yes,
Fortunately, I lose tons of them because, I'm out in the water surfing and I forget them.
Yeah.
It would be great if I had a chip in my head that I could press and go, okay, here's my idea, record it. I could hum it, record it. I guess maybe I could do it on an Apple Watch. I don't know if they're waterproof. I don't even know if you can record on those, but I'm sure I could, but I've never bothered to figure it out because I figure, their songs, there are hooks in my head that I've been carrying around with me for the last 10 years.
Right.
That I still know, and hopefully I'm supposed to sit down in the next week because we got to rehearse in about a week and a half for our shows that we're doing in January. So hopefully I'm going to try and write a couple of songs.
That'd be awesome because
I mean, there certainly is a hell of a lot to talk about, right?
There's no time like the present on that.
Yeah,
and it's been 20 years since the Swing and Utter split for you. So
yeah,
I think it's time.
That, to me, those songs to me are some of the best songs we've done since San Venturi. I mean, and those songs were written very quickly, like in a week, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I will revisit that LP. I haven't listened to it in a long time.
Yeah, I really like the way they came out. The thing is that we have Johnny playing with us now, and he keeps bugging us. Come on, man, because he's been working with Fat Mike, and we're working on the studio Fat Mike's house. But unfortunately, we haven't written any songs with Johnny and Johnny is a huge fan of No Effects, especially since he's been working so closely with Mike. I'm very wary of coming up with, Johnny's like, just give me, if you got a melody or just give me the basic stuff and then we'll make a song out of it. And I'm very wary of that process that he wants to do because I know it's going to end up sounding like. It's not going to end up sounding like a You Forget song.
Yeah. Well, maybe not with you watching over it. You've put your time in.
Well, what I'll probably do is I'll come up with some ideas and then I'll sit down with Adam because Adam is a unique style. But the biggest problem with Adam is that he gets bored of he writes incredible bass lines, but he gets bored. There were times when we'd be working on stuff and I'd say, oh, remember that thing we were doing yesterday? Oh, I don't remember. But this is good. And I'm all, no, but what you were doing, well, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And then it just happens all the time.
Yeah.
That's when we started just putting some way to record the rehearsal so that there was no way he could forget it because we had it on tape.
Yeah. So you do think you're going to attack doing an LP next year?
Every year we say we will, so hopefully this will be the year.
How many months out of the year does punk rock bowling take up for you as a full-time job?
Probably about 8, 9. Not as a full-time job, but that's pretty much what I spend my time on. But I finally convinced my brother that we can bring in more people. I've been arguing with him for the last 3-4 years that we just don't have enough people to do this, and it's just too much work. And I said, we're doing well enough now that we can hire more people. We can pay people to do some of this stuff. There's no reason that we need to be doing this ourselves all the time. So he seems to be understanding that. That doesn't mean he's necessarily going to change, but I'm hopeful. And if we're able to get more people involved so that we don't have to do as much work, then I'm hopeful that we can spend a little more time doing things like writing songs. So
and surfing.
That'd be good. Plus, surfing, definitely.
So, well, Shaun, I really appreciate the time.
Hey, thank you, man. I hope it was good.
Yeah. I can leave it open for you, but I like to ask people at the end if you feel like you've been well represented here, because I try to do my homework and so forth.
Yeah. That's a great question. I mean, I just talk a lot, so.
No, that's great.
I'm never at a loss for words.
I love it. That's great. So that makes it a lot easier, obviously, and I prefer to do these in person, but it's just sometimes it's hard to hook everything up, and doing it on the phone is so much easier. But
definitely.
You've been great though. I really appreciate the time, and
thank you, man.
Talk to you sometime soon. I'll keep you posted.
All right. Take care. Thanks.
All right. See ya.